Here is the rewritten version. 2 billion. Say it again. Billion, not a leak, not a rumor, not something overheard poolside at a tournament. A real offer, a real conversation. Alex named front and center at the top of a document that sent the sports business world into a collective spiral. And just like that, women's tennis stopped pretending everything was fine, because here is the thing nobody wants to say out loud: this was never actually about money. Money is just the part that makes people pay attention. What this is really about is control, who holds it, who has been denied it, and what happens when a 23-year-old from Manila looks at the entire establishment and quietly decides she has seen enough. The WTA spent decades building a kingdom. A billionaire just handed one player the blueprint to build something better. And the most unsettling part for everyone comfortable at the top, Alex is genuinely thinking about using it. Stay with me until the end, because the final detail reframes this entire story. The kind of athlete nobody knows how to handle. There is a specific type of athlete the sports world never quite figures out how to manage. Not the quietly dominant ones, not the champions who smile for the cameras and give journalists exactly what they came for. The dangerous ones, the ones who walk into a room and somehow make everyone else feel like they have been standing slightly wrong their whole lives. Alex is that kind of athlete, born in Manila, forged through hunger and discipline, refined at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, a place that does not trade in potential, only proof. She did not arrive on the professional circuit as a pleasant surprise. She arrived as a statement. Junior Grand Slam titles, coaches whispering her name before she had played a single WTA main draw match. A technique so clean, so surgically precise that scouts were throwing around the word generational before she was old enough to legally rent a car in most countries. But what the highlight reels never show you is the weight she carried before every single match. The Philippines had never produced a Grand Slam champion. Southeast Asia had been for the most part invisible at the very top of women's tennis. So every time Eala stepped onto a court, she was not simply competing for ranking points, she was competing against a story the sport had already written, one that said players from her part of the world simply did not belong. Up here, she dismantled that story line by line. By 22, she had broken into the top 50. By 23, she was hammering on top 20 doors with an aggressive baseline game that made former champions lean forward in their broadcast chairs. Her backhand, equal parts elegance and brutality, drew comparisons to Agnieszka Radwanska's touch layered over Victoria Azarenka's raw power. And yet, despite the titles, the trajectory, the undeniable upward arc, the WTA responded the way powerful institutions always respond to people who challenge their established order, with polite applause, with careful praise, with scheduling decisions and prize structures that quietly, consistently sent one message: you are impressive, but you are not central to our story. Yet she noticed. Every elite athlete notices, they just do not usually say anything. Alex was not built for silence. In a candid interview with a Filipino sports publication, she said something that spread slowly at first, and then all at once everywhere: I didn't come this far to be a footnote, I came to write my own chapter. Nobody understood yet how literally she meant it, because somewhere across the world a billionaire read those words, set down his coffee, and picked up a phone. The billionaire, his name is not the point right now. What he represents, that is the point. Technology billionaire. Forbes listed a venture capital legend who had backed 3 separate unicorn companies before his 40th birthday. He had spent the previous 18 months studying professional tennis the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, not as a fan, not as a spectator, but as an investor, identifying something wildly undervalued. His conclusion was stark: women's tennis was generating extraordinary global interest, and the organization governing it was operating on a structure built for a completely different era. The WTA, in his reading, was a system designed to protect itself rather than maximize what its athletes could actually become. So he did not approach a federation, did not call a television network, did not recruit some retired champion looking for a legacy project. He called Alex. The first meeting happened in Dubai, neutral ground, private venue, no cameras, no agents in the room, just a billionaire who saw a historic opening and a young athlete who had been waiting, perhaps without fully realizing it, for someone to ask the right question. The question was deceptively simple: what would women's tennis look like if the players actually ran it? Alex did not answer immediately. She sat with it, the kind of pause that only comes when someone asks you something you have already answered privately 100 times in the quiet, after hard losses, after frustrating scheduling calls, after looking at her prize check, and then looking up the revenue her match had actually generated. Then she said nothing like what it looks like now. That conversation became a proposal. The proposal became a document. The document had a number at the top that stopped the sports business world in its tracks: 2 billion. The structure. The proposal was Staggering in its ambition, a fully independent professional women's tennis league operating completely outside WTA jurisdiction, negotiating its own broadcast deals, setting its own calendar, controlling its own prize money distribution, and critically giving founding players genuine equity stakes in the organization itself. Not bonuses, not appearance fees. Ownership under the proposed model. Eala would not simply be the league's marquee attraction, she would hold a founding equity position in an organization capitalized at $2 billion before a single competitive ball was struck. The investors' pitch rested on one uncomfortable truth: streaming platforms were desperate for live women's sports content. Entire sponsorship categories, beauty, fashion, wellness, technology, had been systematically underserved by existing tennis broadcast packages. A new league built natively for digital audiences, with athlete-driven storytelling and genuine star power at its center, could capture a market the WTA had spent years failing to properly reach. The numbers supported every word, and Eala ranked inside the top 20, beloved across Southeast Asia, carrying a social media following that dwarfed players ranked well above her. Was, according to the investors' own market research, the single most commercially compelling figure in women's tennis under 25. The offer was real, the vision was coherent, the capital existed. The WTA just did not know any of it, yet why she actually considered it. To understand why Eala did not simply pocket this as an interesting story and return it to tour life, you need to understand what tour life actually felt like from the inside, because the WTA's public image and its private reality had been drifting apart for years, and the distance had grown into a canyon. Prize money inequality was not just a talking point. Yes, the Grand Slams had achieved equal pay at the top. The WTA celebrated that loudly and often, but beneath that headline, the structural picture was far uglier. At the WTA 250 and 500 levels, where most professional players actually spend the majority of their careers, prize funds lagged so far behind the men's equivalent that players outside the top 40 routinely lost money competing. Travel, coaching, accommodation, equipment, the math simply did not work. Women were playing professional tennis at a financial deficit. Scheduling was equally punishing. Players had almost no meaningful input into calendar construction. Tournaments were added, moved, or cut based on organizational politics rather than athlete welfare. Recovery windows were routinely inadequate. Mental health infrastructure was inconsistent. Several prominent players who had spoken openly about psychological struggle described a culture that performed resilience publicly while quietly penalizing genuine vulnerability. And for Eala specifically, the calendar almost never reflected where her presence actually mattered most. Key tournaments in the Asia-Pacific region, her region, the territory where her matches generated the highest ratings and the deepest emotional resonance, were perpetually underrepresented. Playing in front of her own people in time zones that did not require Filipino fans to set 3 a.m. alarms remained a luxury the system rarely offered her. So, when a billionaire arrived with a document describing a league where schedule input was structural rather than ceremonial, where prize distribution was transparent and equitable from the ground up, Eala was not hearing a fantasy, she was hearing a solution. The reaction when fragments of this story began circulating in sports business circles, the WTA's response was revealing, not in what they said, but in how quickly they said it, and in what they chose to leave out. Rather than engaging with the underlying concerns, they reached immediately for the language of loyalty and tradition. They called the proposal destabilizing. They used the word reckless. Senior figures suggested with barely concealed condescension that Eala was being manipulated by outside interests who did not understand tennis. They never once acknowledged whether those outside interests might be pointing at something real. That silence said more than any press release could. The story broke on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, women's tennis had fractured along fault lines that had existed quietly for years, suddenly visible, suddenly impossible to paper over. Eala's name was trending simultaneously across every platform. Within 6 hours, younger fans, the demographic streaming platforms most desperately want, the audience who discovered tennis through viral match highlights rather than traditional broadcast, responded with overwhelming support. The sentiment was consistent: she deserves better. She always deserved better. Filipino fans responded with something fiercer than sports commentary. For them, this was not about economics. It was about a system that had historically treated athletes from their region as guests rather than architects welcome to compete, never consulted on construction. The idea that Eala might not just challenge that system but dismantle and rebuild it entirely. That struck something profound. Veteran players responded with more complexity. Women who had built their careers within WTA structures, who sat on player councils, whose legacies were woven into the organization's history, expressed genuine concern. A competing league, they argued, would fragment an already fragmented sport, split prize pools, confuse sponsors, and ultimately harm the very players it claimed to champion. Their arguments were logical. They were also notably arguments made by people with something specific to protect younger players responded differently. Off the record, several inside the top 30 let their private enthusiasm leak carefully into public statements engineered to sound neutral while communicating unmistakable sympathy. The subtext was clear. We are watching. One prominent coach, speaking to a European tennis publication, offered the line that echoed across the entire conversation: when your best young player starts genuinely considering an alternative. The question isn't why she's considering it. The question is what you did to make her feel like she had to. The WTA issued a formal statement, 4 paragraphs of institutional language that communicated with elegant organizational precision absolutely nothing. It celebrated the tour's history. It referenced a commitment to improvement. It expressed confidence in a unified professional structure. It did not mention prize funds. It did not mention scheduling. It did not mention Eala by name. That omission became its own story, what the league actually looked like, because this was not amateur hour. Details emerged gradually, almost strategically, as if someone wanted the conversation to build rather than detonate all at once. The working title: the Apex Tennis League, not a tour, not a circuit, a league with everything that word implies about permanence, ownership, and collective identity. The name itself was a declaration. 12 founding franchises, city-based, globally distributed, each representing a major tennis market: Manila, London, New York, Dubai, Tokyo, Paris, Sydney, Sao Paulo, Toronto, Berlin, Mumbai, Los Angeles. Every city chosen represented either an established tennis powerhouse or an underserved market with proven appetite for the sport. The Southeast Asian and South Asian inclusions were pointed, deliberate, and commercially grounded markets the WTA had perpetually underprioritized despite viewership evidence that screamed otherwise. Players assigned to franchises through a combination of draft mechanics and direct signing, every player receives a base salary, guaranteed income independent of results. No more financial precarity, no more talented players grinding into early retirement because the numbers simply did not add up. Prize pools distributed through a transparent, publicly audited formula. No backroom negotiations, no opaque bonus structures. Every dollar visible. The broadcast strategy is where the investor's technology background showed most clearly. Rather than licensing rights to traditional networks whose audiences skew older and whose advertising models are fundamentally incompatible with where the sports audience actually lives, Apex would launch its own direct-to-consumer streaming platform, global from day one, subscription-based with a free tier supported by premium sponsorship, and the content would not stop at match coverage, documentary series, behind the scenes access, athlete-controlled personal channels, training content, tactical analysis. An entire ecosystem engineered to build genuine connection between players and fans, the kind of connection traditional broadcast had always deliberately suppressed by keeping athletes at a carefully managed distance. Eala's equity position under this structure would make her conservatively one of the wealthiest active athletes in women's sports within 5 years, assuming even modest projections held.